Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the best ideas in education for Iowa. Not only great ideas that exist in our state that ought to be scaled, but ideas we may know of that we wish existed in our state. It's all fair game. And I'm joined by a distinguished panel of leading thinkers in education, and I think you're going to find this a very stimulating conversation. And we'll be inviting you to take part, of course. We know there's plenty of good ideas about the best of education among the attendees of this session as well. So I'll share a little bit more of the mechanics of how this panel is going to work in a moment, and you'll meet the distinguished panel in just a moment as well. But I'm grateful to the Iowa Ideas Conference organizers to make time for this panel. I'm very excited to learn from you all, and hopefully you too, and grateful to the Gazette for setting up this forum. This is an incredible opportunity to have a conversation about advancing education in the state of Iowa. I'm sure that's a passion shared by everybody in this room, many of whom are familiar faces. I'm Jeff Weld. In the event that we don't know each other, I'm the Executive Director of the Governor's STEM Advisory Council. We've been in business for 8 years. Oh my goodness. And in that 8 years, I think it's fair to say we have acquired a national reputation of excellence for trailblazing in STEM education. We have cutting-edge curriculum going out to the educators of Iowa by the thousands every year. Tens of thousands of students participating. Can I see a show of hands if you've taken part in some of the STEM Council offerings in STEM education? Oh, good. It's always a delight to know that real things are happening out there. I got to get out of the office more often. We've also, I think, distinguished ourselves for connecting schools and businesses through models like the STEM Best model, schools and businesses, teachers and externships, and that sort of a thing. And I think we've also distinguished ourselves for connecting communities with businesses, with schools, with social service agencies, with nonprofits, with informal education through ecosystems and networks. So I think it's fair to even say these days the STEM Council could easily be renamed an Educational Innovation Council. I think so much of what we do transcends those four disciplines of S, T, E, and M. So thanks for taking part in it, and looking forward to pushing the conversation forward even further. So let me, with that, invite each of you to introduce yourselves. Name, affiliation, and a brief bio if you'd like, starting with Chris, please.
All right. I am Senator Chris Knoyer. I was elected to the Iowa State Senate in November, so I just survived my first session. I represent Clinton and part of Scott County on the eastern side of the state. I have a degree in computer science, so I have a background in STEM-related fields, and I was on the Pleasant Valley School Board before I got elected to the state Senate. So STEM and education is very important to me. I was also part of the Quad City Engineering and Science Council and have coached First Lego League robotics teams and Hour of Code classes. And this is a really exciting topic to me, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm Cindy Dietz. I'm with Collins Aerospace, or technically United Technologies, part of their government relations team. But I spent 20 years with Rockwell Collins helping develop community relations, charitable giving, employee volunteer programs, and our STEM education strategy. So as part of that, helped introduce the FIRST programming, the robotics, First Lego League, First Tech Challenge, FRC to Iowa, facilitating Project Lead the Way, an engineering curriculum, and many other partnerships in our community. I also had the privilege of working with Jeff Weld as we developed the STEM education roadmap here in Iowa, and then helped that really launch and be the foundation for the Iowa STEM initiative.
Good morning. My name is Jane Bradley, and I'm the Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at Hawkeye Community College. You've got my bio in your materials. I've been working in the STEM initiative, the governor's initiative, for many years, both at the Southwest Hub as well as the Northeast Hub. I do want to tell you a little bit about Hawkeye. It is a 2-year comprehensive community college. We serve over 5,000 credit students and about 15,000 students seeking non-credit education. And we serve all or part of 10 counties in Northeast Iowa.
I think this is the biggest crowd in a breakout session, period. I have had to put that in there. My name is is Omar Jordan. I am currently the founder and CEO of a company in Des Moines, a startup that I started in 2015. We're up to 30 employees today. And what we do is build technology that allows credit unions and banks to lend at a level where Rocket Mortgage does and Wells Fargo. So giving the community lenders a chance to lend at that level. I was asked by Senator Chris and Jeff to be on the panel to bring in that maybe business and entrepreneurial flavor. I am a little crazy, so if I say something that you don't agree with, it's okay. So this should be fun, and I'm grateful to be here.
And I'm Noreen Bush, Superintendent of Cedar Rapids Community School District. We represent this great city and, of course, our youngest members of this community. So a little bit about Cedar Rapids. We serve about 17,000 kids. We have 31 schools, and STEM has been a long-time part of our curricular conversations. I'm seeing some of our partnerships in the room of our vision as a school district is every learner future ready. So I'm going to make you participate in a moment in our vision. And I'm a teacher first, so just so you know, this is now the interactive part of the introduction. So when I say every learner, you say future ready. Every learner, future ready. Welcome to Cedar Rapids Community School District. So, and we really mean that. And so STEM is a huge part of what we are about as a school district. I would like to enhance something that Jeff said a few moments ago about the S, the T, the E, and the M. We are finding that now it's not living in isolation, but rather in integration and in everything that we do. And it comes back to inquiry-based learning and teaching kids how to ask great questions. That's how the brain is formed, and the brain wants to learn. And so how do we help kids with inquiry best practices? So we've developed a profile of a graduate that includes the major 4 C's that we want all people to have: collaboration, critical thinking, communication, creativity, and then we added a 5th, which is citizenship, and we really want kids to know what it means to be global citizens. So that profile is driving a lot of what we're doing, and STEM is a huge part of what we're doing. And just one more note, we do have 5 magnet schools in Cedar Rapids. 2 of them do focus specifically on STEM as their theme, and one is new this year, McKinley Middle School, but Johnson STEAM Academy is the first certified STEAM Academy in the state of Iowa, distinguished at the highest level. So we mean it, and we're trying to produce great things for pre-K-12 education in Cedar Rapids.
Thank you, Noreen. That is a perfect prelude to a conversation around the best in education. Thank you so much. So moving forward, this is how this is going to operate. When Iowa Ideas invited me to assemble this group of friends and new friends to talk about some of the biggest ideas in education, I composed, with the help of the panel, 4 questions that I thought would be really insightful and provocative. Of course, you'll be the judge as to whether they are all that insightful and provocative. And you'll get a chance to react in real time if you find that you have thoughtful, provocative questions that don't get asked. I've got 4 that they've since reacted to, and we've honed in response to their reactions. And if we navigate our 4 successfully, within 15 minutes remaining, 10 minutes remaining, we'll invite you to contribute questions. And you can contribute them to individuals, to ask for elaboration on something that you hear, or you can ask the entire panel to react to a thought that you have. The floor will be open and to whatever your tastes, whatever direction your tastes want to take you. So to kick things off, I am going to ask them one of those preliminary, thoughtful, hopeful, probing, and provocative questions, and it's this. Let's start with the baseline. How do each of you feel that learners in Iowa presently enjoy some of the best ideas in education, and how might they be missing out on some of the best education ideas? If we could start with you, Chris.
Sure. Well, I still have my school board hat on, but I'm going to look at this from a legislative perspective. And I think we do a very good job integrating technology into our K-12, even pre-K through 12 education. And kids are so comfortable with the technology. And I think taking that to the next level is how we're incorporate that into the real world and how that translates into future jobs. So, knowing that we need to continue to fund the education in our state, we have to continue to ensure that we have a strong economy. And one of our biggest issues in Iowa right now is workforce. So how are we preparing our kids K through 12 to be prepared for post-secondary success, encouraging them, making sure that they understand graduation isn't the finish line, it's just the beginning, and they're going to need some sort of post-secondary training or education in order to be successful in the global workforce. We also want to make sure that they see that those opportunities exist here in Iowa. There's so many cool things that are going on in Iowa that I feel like we're too humble to toot our own horn sometimes, and I want to make sure that we do a better job at that. But in order to fund education, we have to grow the economy, and we can't grow the economy without a strong workforce. So making sure that we're incorporating the relevancy in that learning and what types of careers and opportunities exist after high school in our own communities, so we keep those kids in the state, and then we can continue to attract people from outside the state to come and experience those opportunities.
Jeff, I have a question for Chris, if that's okay. As a senator, you travel your district, but then I see you all over the state. And I hear workforce. I heard Senator Charles Schneider talk about that, the governor, Joni Ernst. What type of talent are businesses looking for? What define workforce?
Well, I mean, I think the 4, 5 C's that, is it Dr. Bush?
I'm close. I'm really
okay.
close to the doctor.
I wanted to make sure I had the right
write a paper. It would be great.
Superintendent Bush. Okay, so the 5 C's, I think, are really those things where jobs exist today that didn't exist 5, 10 years ago. There's going to be jobs in 5 to 10 years that don't exist today. So we need to prepare people that know how to collaborate and communicate and creatively think, critically think, problem solve, and be a good global citizen. And another thing is when you talk to employers around the state, they're looking for 3 things. They're very basic. They want you to show up, they want you to work hard, and they want you to pass the drug test. So that, in addition to those 5 C's, I think that's what we're looking for. We need to have a really dynamic workforce that can adapt to the ever-changing needs of the global economy.
And just on a note for that profile, raise your hand. I see some of the members of the community who helped produce that profile. At least one again. I see a couple of you in the room. We invited our community members, parents, our workforce to that conversation as a school district to say, what do you want for the future for our kids? And these, believe it or not, kindergartners are going to be on your doorstep in 12, 15 short years, right? And thinking differently about what we're doing in K-12, we have to think about those partnerships a little differently. So that's who helped us create that profile, is our community.
And I do. Well, I was going to say, and actually my answer to that in terms of what students are, how they're benefiting, I think that I'll say the STEM ecosystem that we've developed through the STEM initiative, but it's even broader than STEM. It's really those community partnerships and those conversations. And it's the opportunity for students to see, even at pre-K, whether they're doing science or, high school students are part of a community problem-solving or solution-building activity through the STEM Best, like Iowa Big. It's really about, I'll say, not having those walls of the schools, of the education system, the businesses. It's really saying, how are we as a community working to educate students, to help them understand what careers are available, and then at what point they're ready to start really saying, what do I want to do, how that looks, and then how do I have the skills to be a good learner. So yeah, I need some technical skills when I come into work at Collins Aerospace, but I really also need to know how to work as a team member and how to bring the best out of everybody else, because if there are some specifics, I'll be taught, the aviation piece of the job at Collins Aerospace, but I need to have some of those basics, and then again, those interactive skills, and we don't call them soft skills, but it's so important that it's such team-based work, and I think our ecosystem that's allowed students to have a window into that, and our businesses to understand how our educators and those kids, the things that they're facing every day, is really been a benefit to all of us.
I'll speak as a non-native Iowan, although I've lived here over 20 years. Iowa is known around the United States as the education state. I'm from Texas and Oklahoma, And I was in graduate school, and when I had an opportunity to seek a job, I had children in school, and I was so excited to find a position at Des Moines Area Community College so that we could move to Iowa. And the reason was because I needed my children to have a great education experience, and they were not getting that at the time we were in Texas. And so I was thrilled that I found a position, moved to the Midwest, specifically Iowa. And so the reputation of Iowa is an education state, and it's supported by all Iowa citizens, by our legislators. And that's something that's very important to people. I think when they think of Iowa, they think of education, and I think we need to make that a point of pride for the state, that's something that's recognized. So we came to Iowa, and the Governor's STEM Initiative is a great example of how the state focuses on the education needs and the needs of our economy in the state. When I was looking at the challenges, what are we missing? I struggled with this. I've got copious notes, and I've interviewed people even, so you would think I would have a really great answer with all of that, but it boiled down to two things. One was diversity of thinking. When you look at the people of Iowa, we're gaining some pockets of diversity, but it's not a real diverse population, and sometimes that translates into maybe not as much diversity in the ways we think, because we're not hearing voices, a more global mindedness. We are a little more homogenous than some other states, and that's something that I think that Iowans need to think about is, are we really embracing diversity and differences in cultures and different ways of thinking, because all of that brings in new ways of looking at problems. The other thing that I think is huge that's been alluded to is instilling in our kids the incredible importance and value of lifelong learning. Their careers are going to change over and over again. They're doing gig jobs these days. They've got to be learning constantly. So in order to do that, that can't be a job. They've got to have a love for learning. We've got to instill in them, you need to learn all of your life. It's not K through 12. It's not K through 16. For me, it's K through 14. But it's more than that. It's for the rest of your life. You have got to learn. And I think we've got to really start making sure our kids know this is a lifelong process, and figuring out ways to really engage them in loving to learn.
Well, I'll comment on that from my experience as a parent. I'm an immigrant. I didn't get a chance to spend a lot of time in the education system in the U.S., but I have a 5-year-old that goes to the Berkman Academy. It's a private school in Des Moines. And occasionally I'd ask her, what'd you learn in school? And she'd come to me, I learned about Jupiter today, and we mixed some chemicals and cool things exploded. And I know who the 9th president of the United States is. And I think to myself, well, gee, I learned the same thing in school 30 years ago. We're still teaching the same thing. Alexa can tell me who the 9th president of the United States is. Why are we teaching informational material? To me, again, I'm a little crazy, the entire school system was built on the memorization of information. I'd go to the test, and if I didn't memorize the test, I would fail. School failed me. And I think about that, I think about the opportunity. I feel we spend more time on academics, on grading, on testing, and less time on creative and entrepreneurship and business and sales, developing software. And so that's kind of my view of the perspective.
So Omar and I are maybe soul siblings in that innovative practices, I'll get to the challenges part, but the celebrations that we have certainly we are thinking differently now, I think, than we were, but we have a long way to go. And the constructs of how school was designed, American school was designed, was from an agricultural point of view, and this is a long time ago, and how it was about sifted sorting kids, who was college bound and who was not college bound. And that is no longer the mental model. It's high levels of learning for all kids, but how do we define high levels of learning? So I think we've gotten better at understanding what rigor really means. Rigor doesn't mean quantity of content and more and more and more. Rigor means problem solving, innovative thinking, creative thought process, and not about being consumers, but being creators. So how do you shift an entire system whose families, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents say that's how we experienced it. So therefore, I want to see the grade point average. I want to know what my child's grades are. That's from a bigger picture around whether it be any thread of education, we have challenges from reconstructing and transforming our system. So I say I would like to shift from a grading-centered to a learning-centered practices, which means that we're challenging grade systems. Because I have a freshman in college, and I'll tell you, as we were filling out our college applications, grade point average is important. So is how he performed on the ACT. And these were super important things. Yet I know the thing that probably prepared my son the most for Drake University this year was Iowa Big. And those of you who are not familiar with Iowa Big School, it's right here in the heart of Cedar Rapids. It's located in Geometric down by Nubo, and we have another table on the north side where kids are, within part of their day, high school students, really experiencing significant problem solving with community members. So my son certified his history credit with the Iowa History Center. And what he did was he was given a project to research. And after he researched that project, he produced a video, he produced writing, he had to have, talk about citations. When you're writing for historians, you better not mess that up because they will tell you that you messed it up. So that authentic experience prepared him for the next step. Second thing that really prepared him was the Iowa Workplace Learning Connection, and my friends are in the room. But he had an internship with the Linn County Attorney's Office last semester. I'll tell you, that's another place where you really don't want to screw up, right? And so he learned those 5 C's in that arena. So he's advocating for himself. When we had the gazillion snow days, emailing your boss and saying, I don't think it's safe for me to drive today, or I'm going to be there but a little late because my mom has to drop me off because of this, it's so slick outside. Those are some of those essential skills. But then the content piece, he loves computer science, he loves data analytics, he loves economics. But he started, in 9th grade, he was on a cyber defense team. And the skills he learned with coding, cybersecurity, it's not as major, but the skills he learned from that competition at Iowa State were tremendous, so much so that he's made data analytics his major. These were not the 4 walls of his content classroom. They definitely gave him a baseline. It was the application that made him prepared. So we have lots of entry points that we've created for students in our school district, but I don't think that we've systematized it yet. It still feels a little bit of person dependent. And another huge area of growth for us is equity. And that means all kids have access to those experiences. Thomas John Bush is really fortunate because his parents are educators and we knew the avenues. And I was like, you're doing this, I know you don't want to do it, but psh, you're going. And not all of our parents know all those avenues. So helping our community understand, I see some members of our community, we had a recent forum called Not Without Me that our community ran, specifically about how are we going to help our African American children, who you can look at Cedar Rapids graduation rate, this is an equity issue for us. And we are getting after it, and we are closing gaps, but we have a long ways to go. This was a conversation about how our community can wrap around services together and become advocates. So it's not just the business community partnerships, it's our families who also need access and support. So those are gaps for us. And knowing the Future Ready Iowa scope and where that jobs actually exist, that's not for our pre-K-12 kids. We have families right now who are ready for opportunity but need to be skilled up. And how do we wrap supports around them as well?
Well,
Well, yeah, because, I mean, I'm totally energized by what Marie just said. And one of the things, I come from a small town, and where I grew up, a small community, where I had the chance, luckily, to do many things. I was in speech and band and choir and track and cheerleading, and, you could do it all. Those small districts are consolidating. There are fewer resources available. I think there are challenges in our rural districts for them. They may be eligible to sign up and receive some of our STEM initiative programming, but they may not know about it, or they may not have a champion in their building. The other is our urban school districts, where resources, again, in a district like Cedar Rapids or Des Moines, where people are going to the suburbs, those districts are struggling for resources. So how do we make sure it doesn't become a suburban soccer mom and their families, society for our STEM and our education, and it's going to be policy, and it's got to be our system of education, and that's K through 20, and it's the businesses and how. So I'm curious to hear from you guys about that, and how do we take what we've done and we know can work, and say, how do we systemize it so now, and then even in some cases be very intentional and say, how are we engaging young women, and how are we engaging underrepresented minorities in these STEM initiative, but just all the way across our education system, so they know the opportunities are there for them to live and work here in our communities.
Well, that's a perfect cue for the second question. Although there's been some drift, I've come to learn when you assemble a panel of leaders who are creative thinkers, be agile. And there's been drift into the second question, which is the how. In fact, the verbiage was what needs to happen in order for some of those yet to be fully realized great ideas in education to be brought to all Iowa learners. And you've talked about scaling and identification of practices and that sort of thing. So let's breeze through it. The third question is going to get really exciting, but I think this is worth pausing. What kind of solutions do you foresee to get these nuggets of brilliance, these best practices in moments of Iowa across the state, Chris?
Okay, well, I'll breeze through this. First of all, we've got this Future Ready Iowa initiative, which I think is great. It's engaging public-private education partnerships, which I think is fabulous. I have to do a shout out to my IJAG person over here. Programs like IJAG, programs like the Iowa Governor STEM Council, the Empower Rural Iowa initiative to ensure that there's that equity across the state, the infrastructure with high-speed internet and resources in the rural communities, but just addressing issues where all students are receiving an excellent education experience that prepares them for post-secondary success. So we are trying very hard, and even it brings in that children's mental health framework, making sure that we've got healthy, resilient kids, and we're identifying those issues early so that we can address them and make sure that they're coming to school ready to learn and prepared.
Yeah, so I think some of the things I think of are more of the hands-on, sometimes after-school initiatives, and I say it with hesitation because sometimes that's not available to all kids. They aren't able to participate. But when I think of things like First Lego League and the opportunity for students to succeed in a group setting and find out that they can be a programmer of a little robot that's going to perform these tasks on a set field, it gives them confidence when they're in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, so then they feel and can see themselves in maybe a different light, or one they never imagined before. And then the computer sciences elementary, the 12 pilot schools that are starting this year for in high poverty or high need areas of our state. I think that's really exciting. I'm not a computer science expert of any kind, but I recognize that by helping students learn differently, and this computational thinking and sort of the analytical mindset at a young age can really be infused across all of their learning opportunities, and it just brings them a different skill set to begin from. Because when we hire engineers, it's great if you can gather all the data and bring all this information together, but what do you do with it? You have to be able to analyze it and come to a recommendation or a solution. And then I would just say, I'll stop there.
How do we get the good stuff in?
Thank you. You know, I'm not part of the K-12 system, but we receive the product of the K-12 systems at the community college. And I kind of want to go back to this diversity thing, because what we've seen and what we've struggled with are students from our rural school districts, and they come to Hawkeye, and we're located in Waterloo. Waterloo Community School District is a majority-minority school district. But what we've been noticing is when our rural students come in, it's a culture shock for them, and they don't know how to deal. And we have student issues, we have a lot of time involved in trying to help people understand one another and understand the differences and appreciate those differences. So I want to tie my answer into the way I answered the first question, and that's that diversity of thinking. You know, one of the things I think we do is we give students opportunities to work in teams. We put them in work-based learning sites so that they get some real-world experience and work with different peoples, and those are incredibly, incredibly valuable. But I'm not sure we're teaching students to understand why they need to engage in other people. Do they really understand that everybody comes to every situation with a different lens, with a different background, with different experience? Do they really understand the reason people look at things differently? And then on top of that, then why is that such a good thing when you're trying to think critically or solve problems or be creative? Why is that valuable? And so I think giving them experiences is incredibly important because they've got to practice doing that. But I also think we've got to layer in the understanding of kind of the mechanics of what does that mean that we need diverse thinking, or that we need multiple perspectives. Why? Why is that important? How does that work? Because students only know what they know. Sometimes they don't know what they don't know. And I think bringing that in is incredibly important. And I'll stop there.
I don't know that I have a solution, but I'll tell you what I'm seeing from a business perspective as a CEO of a company that constantly is looking for talent, whether it's business, software development, or customer service. If we put a job post for a software engineer, the number of talent from India is more than talent from Des Moines or Iowa by a lot. Not that there's anything wrong with hiring people from India. We've got 2 on the team. India figured out a way, or figure out what the next industrial revolution requires 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and that's why we're behind today. I think about the next factory worker. It's not what we know today. It's not people putting stuff in boxes. The next factory worker are software engineers sitting in a factory developing robotics to replace other factory workers' jobs. Google is creating a software that writes software. So to your point, whatever job we're preparing for the next 10, 20 years, that's gone already. We're way, way, way behind. I mean, even today, we're thinking about STEM and education, but there are companies building things to eliminate those jobs because human capital is expensive. And so what is the next job after STEM? I don't know. But that's kind of the perspective that I look at it. And again, I don't have a solution. I just know that's happening. And how do we fix it? I don't know. I'm not qualified to give you that answer.
We'll solve it.
Yeah.
So that how we are moving initiatives forward or thinking differently, something that both Cindy said and I think Omar's touching on as well is the learning how to learn. And instead of regurgitating content, helping kids in the pre-K-12 system prepare to learn how to learn. So how do you really grind it out? And when you watch a kid pull something apart and they want to know how it functions, that is naturally allowing that to happen and creating opportunities for that to happen. But I keep coming back to the partnerships, and if I were to reimagine high school, I'm a high school English teacher. High school education was where I was reared and when I started my career, and theater. Yeah. So as I think about that, juniors and seniors, we were, and this was in the early 90s, helping them figure out what that senior year was going to look like, which is a stacked, rigorous course line of AP everything, so that they were prepared for college and the next step. We are thinking differently about what that junior and senior year looks like. And my greatest hope would be that seniors in high school might have some AP, but they also hopefully are beyond the four walls of high school and stepping their feet into the community, that they are entrepreneurs, that they are thinking about running their own businesses, and what are the skill sets and the relationships that they need for that to happen, that they are starting their college career and college courses. We pay for dual credit now as a K-12 system. We have kids that are leaving our systems with up to a year's worth, potentially, of college credit. So it's a multiple pathway point of view. So when I think about that destination location from a pre-K through 12 system, that can't just happen in the junior and senior year. We have to build that from preschool on of what does it mean to think like a scientist? What does it mean to think like an engineer? What does it mean to problem solve together? So I was in a kindergarten classroom in an elementary the other day, and a child said to me, they were doing a monarch butterfly experience. Here's an engagement. The local Monarch Preservation Society and Indian Creek Nature Center has been working with Cedar Rapids Community School District. Every single kindergarten classroom got donations of the larvae and how to produce butterflies, and understanding why this is a species that is endangered and what makes that happen. So I walked into this kindergarten classroom, and this little one says to me, I said, so what are you doing today? He says, well, right now I'm an entomologist. And if you'd like to see what I've been studying, I'll bring you over here. But I need to write about it right now because I'm doing my journalism moment in just a second. So, I mean, the child's thinking, the teacher has created the opportunity for the child to know, this is who you are right now, which is a different question than I was asked in kindergarten, which is, what do you want to be when you grow up? No, this is who you are now, and I'm preparing you for that, and you're doing that. So it's just cultivating that thinking process differently. So I think those are some of the hows we need to think about within our own practices. In K-12, that's different. Less compartmentalization, more integration across content areas, but also with our community partners.
Perfect segue once again. We're working very well together. And by the way, I'm going to shift to question 3 and make it our final question together. I'm very excited for your answers to number 3. I hope you'll share my excitement when you hear it. And then after this question, we'll flip this to, I'll either go to the bonus round of questions that I've banked in the event that you're all reticent, or we'll entertain questions from you after this one, all right? So this question is, K-12 education is rapidly coming to be seen as pivotal to workforce and economic development. I think everybody in this room would agree. From your vantage, where is that mindset firmly taking hold, but almost more importantly, where do we have yet room to grow in terms of getting buy-in at K-12 as workforce development frontline? Chris, would you like to start?
Sure. So in terms of workforce, I think we're getting much better about having career counselors in schools that are grabbing kids as young as junior high, and definitely by their freshman year, and saying, what are you doing after high school? What are your plans? What would you like to do? And what are we doing now in the next 4 years to prepare for that? And it could be taking some of those concurrent enrollment classes. It could be doing some sort of internship or externship, job shadow or something, but just starting to explore those areas. So, you know, an internship or a job shadow in high school and learning what you don't want to do can be just as valuable as learning what you do want to do, so you're not wasting time and money and resources after high school. So I read an article a few years ago, when you go to these graduation parties, I have 2 that have graduated recently, don't ask them, where are you going to college? Ask them why you're going to college. And see what the answer is, because some of them don't know, because my parents told me to, or my parents and grandparents expected me to. So that, and then these programs like the Iowa Big program, and I think in Ankeny they call it Orvis, and in Pleasant Valley we call them career academies. In Clinton it's called Synergy, but those are those work-based learning opportunities where students are going out into the private and public sector and working with the community and solving real-world problems. And there was a kid from Clinton High School that presented a couple weeks ago, and he said it's like going to school without a leash. And it was like, wow, I mean, can you imagine how invigorating that could be? And then just talking, it was awesome. I was like, gosh, do you really feel like you're tied back and held back? I mean, what are we doing stifling their full potential by making them feel like they're on a leash at school? That's terrible. And then in talking to one of the teachers that's involved in that program, it has renewed her passion for teaching because she has seen what these programs can do to those kids that maybe weren't so engaged in school. And now they're part of this program and they're just thriving and blossoming before her eyes. So it's not just the kids that are blossoming, it's the teachers that are really benefiting from these programs as well.
And that's an excellent point because I do think that's a critical element to think about the educators, you know, how we're preparing them to be more facilitators than the expert. But I would say that, you know, from the employer perspective, the work-based learning activities are absolutely critical, and the career awareness for a couple of reasons. One, I mean, we are always looking to hire people, and so when you have a robust education system, to your point, Jane, I mean, for a long time, Iowa has been known as an education state. It helps us recruit people here, especially if they have young children that are going to be in our school system. So it's very important. But also, as I will say, as the consumers of those students, and I'm not going to call them products, but I know I've had many conversations with educators who say students aren't widgets. I agree, I know that. And in fact, if we could get to more of the competency-based learning, so it's not about how long you're in a seat or what age you are and what you're studying when you're 12 in whatever, 6th grade or 7th grade, and it's about where you are, what's going on in your community, and you can put some context around that. And I will say our high school interns, I saw some data, I'm looking at a couple of our HR partners here from Collins, and I saw some data that said, you know, our high school interns, because we look for a continuum of experiences where we can engage with students, and that's both at school and out of school activities, like I mentioned, with some of the extracurriculars, but through job shadows, tours, and internships. Our return rate for those high school interns was 60%. So 67% of the students that do internships with us come back to do college internships. And then of the students who do college internships with us, it's 70% or higher. And of course, that depends on your ability to hire at that point, but they come back as full-time employees. So the education system is huge. And yes, we do recruit, obviously, from other states, but there are a whole lot of folks that in this community, and I will say especially for, you know, our professional roles, they're coming from this community. And so we have a huge desire and a huge commitment to our schools to make sure they're the best and that we're engaged, because we know, I think there was another panel, they said, you know, if you train them and they leave, you know, that's unfortunate. But if you don't train them and they stay, that's really tragic.
Okay, yeah, I agree with everything. There's so much going on that's good. It's incredible. You know, when you look at we have the work-based learning intermediary network. This is a whole state-organized group that provides our students in K through 12 with opportunities to job shadow, to at least explore careers, to hear guest speakers, go on tours, and even do internships. We have career academies springing up. One thing I don't know if everyone is aware, and it really jumped out at me recently, I was looking at a map of the United States, and it was relating the number of students, high school students, gaining college credit while they were in high school. And you know how these maps are always color-coded, like heat maps. Iowa was the only state with bright red because we are the #1 state in offering concurrent enrollment. So our high school students are earning college credits at a rate faster than any other state in the United States, which is incredible, but at the same time it poses challenges. So I think, some of the things that I'm seeing, and I guess that I worry about, is sometimes we have students that are looking at careers. They're making decisions earlier and earlier about what career pathway they want. And I guess my caution for the downside is making sure that students get full opportunities to explore, because to Omar's point, the future is the Internet of Things, it's artificial intelligence, it's augmented reality. These are things that are coming, and students have got to really have a broad exposure to what their interests are, because the careers we have now won't be there probably by the time they graduate from high school. So I always worry, are we putting students into career pathways where they decide, okay, I want to be a CNC machine operator and work in manufacturing, but then they get into that job, they love it for about 5 years, and then what's next? Are they too narrowly trained? So I think that would be something I see at the college level, that I think we, at that level, need to do a better job of exposing our students to various careers. But I think that also goes back into the K-12 system of making sure that broad exploration. I love that opportunity to kind of role play as a particular career. That's what we need. We need students to see a lot of careers, see what it feels like to be in that career, explore it, and do it with many areas, but also don't get them too targeted or tracked into a career too early.
Listening to Noreen and Cindy talk about what's happening behind the scenes, I didn't know that is taking place. So that is exciting. It gives me a great deal of hope for Iowa and the next generation. I think modern day success, at least back in my day, was you go get a degree and you get a job. And I remember as a teenager, I'd ask my dad, or my dad would ask me, what do you want to be? And if I said anything outside of a doctor or a lawyer, you can just see, the disappointment in his eyes. And I was a C- student at best. I just hated chemistry, hated physics. I just couldn't do it at all. So in Jordan, where I grew up, this is how fortunate we are here in the U.S. Your grades determine which path you go into education. So my grades determined the systematic path for me was a laborer. Nothing's wrong with being a laborer. Nothing's wrong with being an electrician or a plumber. But a plumber here makes more than a doctor does in Jordan. And so to me, it was I got to get out of there because I couldn't make it. So America was the place. Chris and I were talking about a week ago, and I think you said, hey, did you know they're teaching entrepreneurial classes in colleges? And that was exciting, and we hung up. But then I hung up the phone and I thought, wait a minute, how are we grading that? Do we know what it takes to be an entrepreneur? A PhD in failure. I forget what it is.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? So how are we grading those types of classes?
Yeah, that's the philosophy at Iowa Big is it's an I until it's an A. You're incomplete until you've completed a project to certify your learning. And so, which failure is an expectation. And so, but we didn't really create that archetype at the beginning of schooling, did we? It's okay to get the F. I think that risk-taking and encouraging risk-taking is probably that next adventurous launch, that we are encouraging that kind of environment. Something that is happening at the state level, and I'm happy that I've been able to be a part of it, Iowa has a business council, and that is a group of corporate leaders who got together for years to kind of problem solve economic and workforce problems together, but they created an offshoot of that called the Iowa Business Education Alliance. And so it's, Cindy and I have been a part of these conversations, so there's a few K-12 superintendents on this council, and some of the regents, university presidents and provosts, as well as corporate leaders, looking at this as what we've just described and what we hope. What's the big question and how are we going to solve that together? So the workforce issue in Iowa is real. We have a ton of job openings. To your point, where is our Iowa talent? Well, I'll tell you where they are. They're in the classrooms in Cedar Rapids Community School District. I mean, they're in our classrooms. And when you were asking about rural, access is a real deal. So how are we capitalizing on our digital age? Because really, anytime, anywhere learning is available anywhere, anytime. But do we have the resources and the systems to promote that across our state? And connecting learners, I know that I've walked into classrooms and kids are connected to people across the globe. Authors, scientists, kids from other classrooms. It's just making it happen. And so we have opportunity right within the state for kids to connect with kids, for kids to connect with employers. So those would be some of the opportunities. Like, I want you to come talk to our kids and show them. So you cannot, even though as much as technology and automation is headed this direction, nothing will replace human relationships. So I always say that to teachers. It's awesome. We've launched a one-to-one access in our high schools, but nothing replaces the human relationship of teachers understanding where kids come from, what they need, and what their interests are, and what their passions are, and how you create those relationships. So when we see our students have work experience at Collins, it's the relationship that makes them come back. It's because they feel safe, they understand your culture, they're like, I could work for you someday, I feel safe here, and I want to work for you. So how do we connect those relationships early on through mentorship and helping kids and families understand what the opportunities are within the community and the state?
Cedar Rapids schools are in good hands, aren't they? Well, with remaining minutes, I'll invite you to weigh in here. The concept is the best ideas in education in our state. What exists that ought to be grown, what doesn't exist here that exists elsewhere that we ought to import, etc. So if somebody has a question, I have two banked. One is, by the way, if you're interested, pushing each of these folks to issue a grade to Iowa's education system. But I'll bank that question in case you have a better one. Anybody got a better one? Sure.
I don't know that it's a better one, but it relates to what you were saying, not grading the Iowa educational system as a whole, but I'm thinking about, I mean, you folks are obviously really talented and motivated and great, but we got a lot of disparities in education. And I'm blessed, I'm from Haiti, I have a great school system, but I also know, as I look around the state, Haiti is this end of the spectrum, and there's a lot of folks at the other end of the spectrum. So how do we deal with these disparities? Get everybody, not bring the Yankees and Waukees and the others down, but how can we bring everybody else up?
Should we put that to everybody? How do we smooth it out? Equal
Well,
access?
I want to talk about one very specific small way that we are working with IJAG at Collins. You know, for students, and IJAG is a program for students who face multiple barriers to graduation. And the program is there to help them not only graduate and be successful in high school, but then be prepared to go on to career or education. And so we are partnering with them with our African American professional employee resource group. So they've got some mentors who look and maybe have experienced some of the same challenges. Many of these students are students of color, not all of them, but we found that we needed to be very intentional about creating a relationship so that students saw someone who looked like them, that they felt safe, and then to take it, my hope is that we take that to the next level and then not only help them graduate, which they do in very high percentages, but make sure we connect them through the workplace learning connection. So now they're coming in for those programs like tours and job shadows, because right now we're seeing students from middle class white families. And there are many of them are children of our employees. Why? Because our employees know about the program and they encourage their kids to get involved. And here is a group of students that have just as have just as much potential, but not the opportunities. So that's a very small microcosm, but I think what you're saying is, okay, how do we take those kinds of things and for districts that like Cedar Rapids, or and how do we make that more available?
It's not only the minority communities, I sense a lot of rural urban disparities.
Yes, absolutely.
Small towns and what they're able to deliver in terms of an academic environment versus an Ankeny or a Waukee or a place like Cedar Rapids.
And I think I'm sorry, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, addressing the inequities in funding, obviously, is one. The Empower Rural Iowa initiative, where we're getting high-speed internet to every corner of the state. What we're doing to attract teachers to rural areas through student loan repayment programs or giving incentives to attract teachers and addressing that rural housing shortage. I mean, if the average house in rural Iowa is 70 years old, how are you going to attract that young teacher unless you have those affordable homes that they would want to move to, and creating those cultural and recreational activities and reasons why people move to those communities. So that's something that we're addressing more at the state level, and I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, because we do see that at the community college, those disparities. It's quite interesting. And in fact, I was talking to one young man that works at our college, and we used to work for Waterloo Schools, and he knocked on doors because we have the first day of school. Waterloo Schools, over 1,000 students don't show up because the first day of school is arbitrary. That's a date. They get there eventually. But he was one of those door knockers that went around, and he said, he asked one young man, why aren't you going to school? And he said, I live on this block, look up and down this street. Nobody on this street has a high school diploma. This is my neighborhood. This is where I'm going to stay. So why do I want to go to school? This is my life. And he said that was really hard to work with. So that's not necessarily rural. That has to do with the African American population. But with our rural students, it's kind of the same mentality of this is my neighborhood, or this is my town. This is where I want to live, and these are where my friends are. This is where I feel safe. And so trying to expose them to the rest of the world. I think, in my opinion, broadband access has been huge because then they can connect with children in other areas, in other countries. They can make those connections, they can build those bridges, they can talk to Omar and understand what it is to be an entrepreneur, and someone who's from a different country that can talk about that experience. But I think that's a way to connect us all together is technology, and that's what we're here talking about primarily is technology. Use it, leverage it to solve social issues as much as educational issues.
I just have a challenge for the people smarter than me on the panel with regard to your question. Why does school have to be brick and mortar? You're right. If I'm in Sioux City and I want to plug into the Des Moines school system because it's better, why do I have to learn in Sioux City?
There's this thing called open enrollment law, so maybe Senator, we could do that. But that's part of it, is that, so this, October 1st marks count date in the state of Iowa, which means that students have to be enrolled in our school district to count them. However, you can have relationships. So for example, Iowa Big is a collaborative between 4 school districts here. So we all share that collaborative effort. I do think that there's opportunity for anytime, anywhere learning, though.
You can go to college online.
You can, yeah, absolutely. And so it's a matter of capitalizing, I guess, on the strengths of, we have 3 comprehensive high schools and 1 alternative high school in Cedar Rapids. And I think we're finding more and more family consumer science is, if you watch Top Chef, the culinary art shows, like this is a thing. Like this is a reignited profession that students are really passionate about. We have an amazing program right here, Washington High School. Our other high schools also have these amazing programs, but we couldn't find a family consumer science teacher for 2 years. We couldn't find people because they were not going into the profession, and we pay pretty well in Cedar Rapids. So I can only imagine in Southwest Iowa, family consumer science postings and the candidate pool that they're getting. So we too are suffering in our workforce for employees, paraprofessionals, substitute teachers, Like, we have fewer folks joining our profession, so that's another question mark for us. So I don't necessarily have an answer, but I do think we need to think differently about resources. And teaching is no longer just about the content. Teaching is social work. It is a health profession. It's a mental health profession. It is all of those things. And it's a really, really, really tough job. And we have amazing teachers, but they aren't compensated the way that other countries compensate education, like Finland, for example. It's just, we're not there yet.
Not there yet. And unfortunately, we are out of time. By the way, a cap on that question. I'm so pleased to say that the Governor's STEM Advisory Council prioritizes the underserved first with every dollar spent. Every scale up, every extern, every STEM best model awards as a priority the underserved, rural, urban, etc. across Iowa. Well, with that, regretfully, we're out of time, but I want to thank you all for joining us and making this a stimulating conversation. I want to thank Iowa Ideas Conference and the Cedar Rapids Gazette for the opportunity to conduct this panel. Most of all, I really want to thank from the bottom of my heart the panelists for trusting me and coming down and conducting this panel. If you join me, please, in acknowledging entertain any questions.